Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. Those interviews are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to competitive teams, racers, rock crawlers, business owners, employees, media, and private park owners, men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active and off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world we live and love and call off-road.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Kevin Yoder. If you've been around the Ultra 4 racing or the early days of rock crawling, Kevin is a name that you'll recognize. Kevin was at my first event that I put on at the Cow Rocks Put Up or Shut Up shootout in Lake Amador in 2001. He was also a first-time competitor driver at our first Vora 4x4 buggy race in Prairie City. This was back in probably 2002, 2003. And he's got quite the extensive time in competition. And he's from Northern California. And I want to say, Kevin, thank you for coming on board and talking with us and sharing your history.
Thank you, Rich. Good to join you.
Excellent. So let's jump in with both feet. And where were you born and raised?
So I was born actually in Sacramento, California. Basically spent my entire life in Northern California. Sans I went to moved to Reno and went to school up there, worked and played off-road up there for a couple of years, and then I ended up coming back to California in 95. So, and went back to, lived in Loomis where I grew up, and then moved up the hill about 19 years ago up to between Grass Valley and Auburn. So this is where I've had my residence the last 19 years.
Okay. And what age did you move to Reno?
Oh, I think it would have been 22.
22?
I was there for just a couple of years, yeah.
Okay.
22, 20. So yeah, 22, 23 is right in there.
All right, so then that means that you spent a lot of your time in the Loomis area of Sacramento. Is that where you said you grew up? Okay.
Yep. I spent majority of my time, in Loomis. So growing up as a kid, so.
And that's pretty rural, or it was back then.
It was back then. Loomis has changed so much. It was one of those places that was the other side of the tracks that you probably wouldn't brag about being from. And now that place has grown so far out of control, I had to move up the hill because I couldn't afford to live there. So, it's a beautiful place. My parents still live down there. I do like Loomis. We wanted a little bit more property, so we moved up the hill to where it was a little more affordable.
So did you grow up near the schools that you went to, or did you have to bus in, or what was that like?
Oh, then, yeah. So the grammar school days, I rode the bikes. We rode the bike to school every day, and then went to Loomis Grammar School, and then on to Del Oro High School, to where, freshman, sophomore year, I walked a lot to school through the backwoods or through the back pastures getting there. And then, obviously, once we could drive, I drove. So, but yeah, real close. And it was a great community, lots of fun around there. So,
well, Del Oro, if I remember right, had some pretty good football teams back in the day. Did you play sports in high school?
Yes. So the Del Oro was a powerhouse in football. We were kind of, my class was 89. So we were kind of on the front end of the when they made their huge run and were dominant for so many years. So yeah, we won the championship, and also ran track and wrestled. So I had a pretty successful sports career at Del Oro. I went to play football after Del Oro. I went to play ball at Butte College, and ended up not finishing it out because I started playing rugby and never looked at football again. So
Oh, really? Why was that? Was it just because of it's more movement, or what was the
Mm,
what was
I, I
the?
think I think the rugby has appeal because it was more camaraderie than when, in high school, football is the best thing ever, man. You have your friends and you're all, your group of guys in there. And when you get to say there's, 50 people on the team where you know everybody. And when you get to a very competitive JC and there's 125 people going for however many they're going to keep. And the competition it wasn't the same feeling. And there are some other things that just took place that I wasn't, it just was a different environment. And then I went and I rolled my ankle, so I got sidelined. And then while I was a sore ankle, I was watching rugby. I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then, like I said, I went out on the field hobbling while on a break from football and never came back to football.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Okay.
and rugby was something that I liked because it's nonstop action versus um, football. It has a burst of a bunch of plays. My problem with rugby is I still kept getting concussions because I couldn't unlearn the football out of it. So in rugby, you don't go for the big hit, but it's just a different game. But rugby was such a good experience because there's very few things where you can compete against somebody for whatever the duration, as hard as you can go, ready to throw blows at any time. And then the minute the whistle blows, it's over and everybody gets along. And that was just such a departure from what football was. So, and especially at a college level where everybody thinks they're going to go to the pros and all that. So it's just the camaraderie was unbeatable. So, and we got to do lots of good things, and we played. We'd go down to the Palo sevens tournaments down in Palo Alto, to where down there at Stanford, which is a prestigious rugby team and everything. So, and the rugby teams would put you up, the host teams, and so it's a great community and a lot of fun. And then the physical competitiveness is pretty intense too. But like I say, once the whistle blows, when it's over, you're drinking beer with the guys you just beat up against. So
Yeah, I don't understand. I can't figure that out. Why a sport like football? I played a bit in high school. I was never very good. I think I didn't get the right attitude until after high school, but coached it in the Pop Warners. When Rich was young, before he, got into high school ball, and it always seemed like there was a lot of contention from team to team to team with, like you said, afterwards, it wasn't necessarily handshake. Now, when he played football up in Cedar City, it was a different story because, like, the eighth grade ball up there, when we moved up there, everybody was from the same town. There was one town, Parowan, that was nearby that had a team, but all the rest of the teams came out of Cedar City themselves. So everybody went to grade school together, and then they split and went to high school after that. So, there was more camaraderie there than at any point that I can remember.
right, and the other big thing is Del Oro's always had outstanding coaches, and the coaches were, an extent the coaches were life coaches too at Del Oro, and they kept us out of trouble. And if we did have problems, things got settled in house, within that group. And so it's such a team sport and a family. And then when you get to college, it's an individual. You're pretty much everybody's there for themselves and how good they can do and shine. And because, like I said, everybody out there thinks they're going to the pros.
Right.
So
So then, in those early years before high school, was it most of the time spent, like you said, riding your bike to school and out and about, or did you play sports at that age as well?
I mean, we, played sports, played soccer at a young age. Didn't run football, didn't play football. Grammar school ran track. So didn't only played soccer and actually in baseball too. But it was just local rec stuff. I did play on a competitive team where I got put on a bus and would go down to the Bay Area. When I was 13, 14 or so, to play with some in an under 18 league. So that was pretty competitive. I did almost choose soccer over football. I'm glad I did not do that. Um, but
I
so
can't
yeah,
see you as a
played
soccer
sports.
player.
Yeah. Well, soccer is it was fun. It's fun when you're a kid, but yeah, football outshines it.
Yes.
So, but yeah, so just local sports things around Loomis, and then yeah, riding bikes. Never, I think I did a BMX race a couple times, but it just wasn't really in the cards or the timing to do that. And just started wrenching on stuff, and well, always had a little junky dirt bike to go ride around on and work on.
So let's talk about those early years wrenching. Then, was it was your dad, into automotive at all, motorcycles or cars?
So he was into what got me started with off-roading is my parents always basically had an off-road vehicle, back to like a 1973 Wagoneer, that we spent tons of time in, and we did lots of off-roading, not necessarily hardcore wheeling, but before I was 10, I'd probably touched almost every state on the West for going, loading up the Wagoneer with I had a younger brother, 2 years younger than me, and my mom and dad, and we would go do a lot of camping, a lot of ghost towning, a lot of rural traveling on back roads. And back in the day where you could go through pasture to pasture across Nevada and just close the gate behind you, and that wasn't an issue. So I spent a lot of time off road in that way. Went to some of the famous trails just in that Wagoneer, and they would go with a club, and there would be more capable wheel rigs also. So we'd climb out of the Wagoneer and then ride with the guys in the CJ5s that could go more places than the Wagoneer, and that's kind of how I got started. We'd spend a week in Mojave Desert, goes 2 weeks in Nevada, Utah. So really got involved. I don't think I ever stayed in a camper or a camp trailer till I was in my late 20s, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
It was a tent. So, yeah, I learned to camp out of a tent. So
So you didn't do scouting then or anything like that, did you?
scouting.
Boy Scouts?
Oh, actually, I did Boy Scouts. I did Cub Scouts. Then
Okay.
went up to Boy Scouts. I think I made Life. Went up to a Life Scout, the
Very
one
good.
behind, one under Eagle, and then high school and sports took over. So
Right. That's a pretty prevalent answer for most people, is that they get to life and then high school, girls, cars, something, typically it's high school and all those other things. And
yep.
that's when scouting stops. But I get it. Um, so did you, in school, what kind of classes did you have an opportunity to take? Shop classes, that kind of thing?
Oh yeah. So high school started with I can't remember if I took it. Auto shop, the auto shop one, and then went through that, and I enjoyed that. I didn't get into the welding classes till maybe like the last year, or yeah, I don't think I took welding or wood shop till the last year. But I liked the auto shop. So did the first year, and then I don't remember if there was an auto shop two, or I just was the teacher's assistant to remain in the auto shop. And basically, I liked it because it was a free lab to work on stuff. So
Okay. So what was the first car that you had that you got to drive?
well, I got to drive the Jeeps and the Wagoneers when, I don't know, very, very young, sitting on dad's lap.
Right.
So, as far as when did I drive my own first car?
Yeah.
I was going to say I convinced my parents that I could buy a truck when I was 14 or maybe 15 and started working on it. And so, yeah, there was maybe some underage driving happening around Loomis.
That's the nice thing about being rural.
Right. So, no, that we learned to wrench on cars. Just um, while the auto shop gave you some of the basics. My dad did have a place. We had a dirt floor barn, and so I was able to figure out how to strike an arc with the arc welder and start building things. So I built my first vehicle was a 1960 Ford that pickup that didn't have an engine, and then the neighbor had an old late 60s station wagon with a 390, a Ford FE 390 in it. And a few months after that, I had the station wagon stripped and that 390 in my Ford truck. So
On your own, that's pretty good.
yeah,
That's good.
yeah, I really like figuring out how to do things on your own. So, and yeah, I had it going, and my dad did help with something. I think I got a loan from my grandma to go through get the engine rebuilt. And so yeah, that was my first vehicle. I never had great success keeping it on the road, keeping it running, but that was my first car.
Okay. I think a lot of us went through that, especially with things that we built ourselves. I had a '54 Volkswagen Bug, and I swear to God that I had that thing apart like at least once a month for a week, fixing something, whether it was the tranny, front end, the motor. Um, rebuilt We rebuilt the motor on the side of the highway between South San Francisco and San Francisco, where I could see Candlestick Park. My
Oh
dad
wow.
brought me the parts, and I had to replace one of the cylinders on the highway. A tow truck was not an option.
Right. I hear you.
So then, get through high school. You went to play ball in college at Butte.
Hmm.
Did you have a major or an idea where you wanted to take your schooling?
No, other than construction management was always in the back of my mind to do construction management or some type of engineering, but I was not the most studious person. I knew I didn't want to be a pure engineer. It always just had it in my mind I was going to be a construction manager. I was right at the tail end of high school. I had a mentor that was a project manager, so I would work with him um, and see how things worked, and then really cemented the idea that construction management was where I wanted to go. But then I also had such a love for the automotive side. So in college, I was never I was a full-time student and a full-time worker basically. So I always had to have the job to pay the bills and then to go to school. Um, so I worked for, if you probably remember, the old super shop stores.
Yep.
So I worked there and then did steel fab to pay the bills. But yeah, I just had it in my mind I was going to do construction management. When I went to Nevada, was partially for the reason of going to school, and then they were going to have a construction management program, but they didn't bring it online, and there was only civil engineering. And then I came to a point when I was living up there that I was having a blast playing rugby for the club team up there in the school, but my girlfriend and I were at that time, we're spending all our time driving back over the hill every weekend to go to the Rubicon and Fordyce and go play down here. So we ended up coming back, and I never finished that school. So
Okay. And so now you're in construction now?
right now I started working in the railroad for the Southern Pacific
Oh,
Road in '95. Union Pacific purchased Southern Pacific not too long after. I worked for the Union Pacific Railroad for almost 25 years, and then I got caught in the corporate downsizing and was released. And within a week, I was hired as a consultant to do the same exact work that I was doing as a UP employee. So the last 3.5 years, I have been working for an engineering firm doing construction management for the railroad at the same role I had when I was the railroad employee, essentially.
Okay, so you weren't like the train engineer or the fireman or whatever they call it. You were on the construction end of the railroad.
So I did a number of various things through the railroad. The one awesome thing about the railroad is it has such versatility, and you can change jobs relatively easy to do different things. So at the railroad, was brought in as a composite mechanic, or basically a pipe fitter. So I did a lot of welding for the railroad, did underground installation, operated lowboys, operated cranes. Then I got moved into the operating side, and actually probably, for 10, 12 years, I was the guy that coordinated all the rock used on the railroad on the west. So
wow.
The rock underneath the tracks is called ballast, and I coordinated the loading and unloading of that for 10, 12 years. So we coordinated about 600,000 tons of rock material a year. So move a lot of rock with big trains.
Yeah.
So I was involved with that. So I was involved with the operating group. I've spent a lot of time on the front of the locomotive, just like a little kid. Like, I can't believe they're paying me to ride a locomotive. So, and that was the fascination with the train, of staying there is just, I love, it's the railroad. So
yeah.
Who doesn't want to be around trains? And I'm still a little kid around them at times.
So then you probably ended up at some point in Portola for railroad days. Have you ever done that?
I have been up there. I haven't been part of the railroad days, but yeah, I've been up there and seen it and helped move equipment for it and various things like that. So
that's a pretty cool event. If anybody in Northern California or Nevada are into trains at all, Portola, California has a railroad days, and it's kind of like a county fair type situation set up, but it's tied in with the railroads. I would imagine that's the Union Pacific there, isn't it?
That is the Union Pacific, yes. And they actually, I think they used to have, there's a museum up there. I believe it's open probably pretty much most of the year, but you could actually drive a locomotive or operate a locomotive up there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I believe that's something they used to do. My dad is a huge rail fan. So he's been up there. I know he's done that before. So
I robbed the train up there in Portola. We were, I used to be for a few years here in Placerville. There's a group called the Apple Hill Gang, and it's a Western theatrics group. And we'd go all over to different county fairs and things like that, and to, special days like Portola Railroad Days. They hired us to come up and do skits and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that we did was rob the train when they had, I think it was the president of Union Pacific on the train. So we couldn't do any, we shot blanks, dressed up in authentic Western gear. We robbed the train and then went on our way. But Michael Gross, the father, Family Ties, I think it might have been, with Michael J. Fox, the guy that played the dad, is a big train enthusiast. And he was up there that year, and we ended up eating lunch with him, and he was on the train when we robbed it and stuff. And it's always interesting to go up and do acting work in front of professionals,
Right.
and then have them say, "Hey, you guys did a really good job." You never know if they're just pulling your leg or, if they mean it or not, but it was pretty cool. But I always get to say, at least I got a chance to rob a train.
Nice.
So then you're overseeing the construction management for them now as a contractor, then consultant?
Yeah. So essentially, I'm a contractor who works exclusively for the railroad, Union Pacific Railroad, and manage public projects. So where a public project road authority like Caltrans has a project to build something over the UP or under the UP, then I'm the one that manages those projects, coordinates the work, and I have that responsibility.
Awesome. That's got to be a lot better than actually working for the railroad?
It has some advantages, and I don't know, I'm basically kind of like a loyal old dog, so it's still a little different. It still takes getting used to. I still like sometimes shake my head that I don't work for the rail, directly for the railroad. I know there's a lot of the world we live in. There's not many 30, 40, or 50-year pins that give out from companies anymore.
No.
And I realized that, and I was, it's the railroad, and I could never see myself leave. As miserable as I was at times, I would never quit, and so they kind of made my decision for me. So, but then I had an opportunity to come back and be involved with it, and rather than depart to go do other stuff, I still wanted to stay with that type of work and be around it. And so I have been, and I've been fortunate there because I'm still around it. And I went to Omaha a couple of weeks ago, got to have dinner on the Heritage train.
Nice.
As part of my job, and I'm involved with a lot of cool projects around California. So I'm still involved with the railroad, but yeah, it has advantages and disadvantages. So
Right. Cool. So let's get into some of the wheeling stuff. You said that driving the Wagoneer, and then going on family trips and stuff like that. You had a Ford pickup.
Yep.
And then when did you get your first 4-wheel drive?
So I had the Ford pickup. I ended up getting what led me to the Jeep. Having the Jeep is I bought a wrecked Nissan truck that was going to be cheap. I fixed the body, and then I traded it for a Mustang, and then the Mustang was just going to be a headache and tickets, or I would crash. And so, and it had a stereo system in it. And another high school friend had his dad had a Jeep that they had taken apart 5 years earlier, and so I ended up trading that Mustang for a Jeep parts that was a complete Jeep that needed to be put together. And I ended up trading them for it. And then I took the Jeep over to the auto shop class at the high school and basically kind of put it together there for my project when I was a TA. So I built the Jeep in auto shop in high school, and which was incredible. It was, the frame was a 79. It had a fiberglass Jeep tub that had never been mounted from the old Malott in Lincoln.
Wow.
And so it was, basically relatively stock parts. It had a straight six, 4.2 liter straight six, and a T18 and a 20. And I put it together, and that's where it all started. So I don't think it was running very long before I think I maybe went a year before it rolled it the first time, and then it was like opening the fountain. So
when you rolled it that first time, was it street or trail?
Trail.
Okay, good.
I was beside myself when I rolled it. It rolled it doing something dumb, of course. My buddy had a Baja bug that got stuck, and then I went down there to try and pulled him up, and then one of the tires came up, and he panicked, slammed on the brake, which slingshotted me over backwards. So, and then after that, it seemed like the rolls started. So I probably went a year without rolling it, and then after that, it just opened the floodgate. So,
what trail were you on when you did that?
Oh, just up on the hill.
Okay.
Out of Loomis, between Loomis and Penryn. I can't tell you how many hours that I have up there. That's where a lot of us learn to go wheel and drive. And there was rock crawling up there. There was an old mining equipment and a flume and some areas that they stacked rocks kind of in a gully. So we learned to rock crawl in there, literally. So.
Okay. And then the rest of that is all like dirt roads and oak trees.
Correct.
And washouts and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a lake up there where we could see how deep we could go in and all that fun stuff. And then a lot of wheeling out at Folsom Lake. We used to I don't know if you still can. I imagine if the water's low enough. But one of the big things we do in high school is wheel from Rattlesnake Bar all the way out to Granite Bay and then back. And it was whether it was at midnight or on the weekend, that's what we do. So being local, you have advantage of being local. You know people everywhere. So we had keys to the gates all around the lake, so we could go in when we wanted. Never got worried about being locked in. So.
I did that with SMUD. I had a set of keys to the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. A friend of mine worked for him and gave me a set of keys so I could get through all the gates in that Crystal Basin area around the base of the Rubicon.
Mm-hmm.
That was nice. Yeah. That was handy.
Yeah, up on the hill, in Pennant and Loomis, the railroad runs through there, and so obviously we were probably trespassing on someone's property, wheeling up there, and one of the landowners up there that I think leased property from the railroad came out and gave us a key so that we didn't break down his gate to go wheeling. He just says, open it, shut it behind you, lock it. So I've literally had I've had a railroad key since I was 17 years old. So
awesome. So let's talk about that first Jeep then. You said it was a 79 frame and was that a CJ7 or a 5?
CJ5.
CJ5. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, 79 frame. It had the typical stock back cage, and then I built the cage for, at the school. We put the cage in it. I got to put the old, I think it had some Norseman True Tracks that were unbelievably wobbly, but I came out. Yeah, they needed air every other day. So, but I had a blast with that thing. I mean, I can't imagine. Life was good when I was in that Jeep. So
that's awesome. And then how long did you keep that with a fiberglass body? If you rolled it a few times, did you get good at patching fiberglass or?
That body held up very, very good. So, that Jeep was like I started when I was about 17, I think. And then it held up great. Let's just say that. I ended up, it wasn't too much longer before I actually started racing that Jeep out at Prairie City. Prairie City used to have a lot of club events out there. I can't remember I know there were Sacramento Sand Champions. There was a club out there that used to put on a play day, and I can't remember the name of it. And that's when I think I drove my dad's Jeep out there around a course once when I was 13 or 14. And they were out there working it, or covering the radio side of it. But so I've been racing out there. That Jeep raced at Prairie City for years. They had the mud drags, and they had one of the most fun things to do at Prairie City was they had the barrel racing. I don't know if you remember that or not, where it was basically the same as horse barrel racing, but in vehicles.
Right.
And it was just go send it. I had a jet that I had for the carburetor that I drilled to an 1/8-inch hole, so thing would not idle or run under like 2,500 RPM. But as soon as I'd put that jet in for the barrel racing, and it would just stay pinned the entire time.
So you raced at Prairie City before the Vora race then. Awesome.
Yep. So I've literally been racing at Prairie City for more than 35 years.
That's pretty good. That's cool. So then with that, rolled it, you said you started modifying it. What were some of the first modifications you did?
I think we probably did spring over, made a spring over, tweaked around with the springs to make them flex better. Started beefing it up, and then I actually started tough trucking that Jeep. When I moved to Reno, we took the Jeep up there, and I was having fun playing in the desert, and we'd go to the local 4-wheel drive shops and looking for things to do, and they told me there was an event coming up. It was too much trouble to go back over the hill to go race at Prairie City. Didn't really have the funds to go back and forth. So then they told me about a tough truck event that was going to be at the livestock event center. And so that kind of started me racing that little CJ, and it ended up becoming, I ended up wrecking it hard enough to where I kind of took myself out and kind of destroyed the Jeep. So, but I want to say I won 3 or 4 tough truck events in that little CJ.
Wow, that's pretty good. So you said you took yourself out.
So Grass Valley Fair, I want to say 95-ish. Yeah, I rolled it pretty good, and spider webbed the helmet on the ground.
Ooh.
So I had a good fuzzy head for quite some time after that.
So one of those
And
concussions you talked about.
Yeah. So, and the problem was I had several within a short time, and so it set me back a little ways.
So now jumping forward a little bit, you know you have a history of some concussions. When you're racing, like at King of the Hammers, are you doing anything special for that besides like a Hans of Ice or something?
I don't go cheap on safety stuff now. So
Right.
I've spent a ton of time. I have had, a handful of injuries in the off-roading world. Concussions being, more the significant side of it. It's one of those things where I may be cheap on the rest of the vehicle, but I'm not going to cheap out on safety gear. So I've always kind of been on the forefront, or tried to be on the forefront of what's the best equipment, knowing that the only way that I'm going to be able to keep doing it is to kind of protect myself there. So I've always done my homework. I've never raced, even back on the first KOH. I did have an R3 then, head and neck restraint on the very first KOH.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I've never raced a KOH without a head and neck restraint. And I have been in some significant crashes, as some of you guys probably know. I mean, it wrecked at 95 miles an hour at Prairie City, went for a 200-yard tumble and broke the head and neck restraint in that wreck. But was I shooken up? Did I, rattled? Yep. Did I take some time off? Yep. But I literally walked away from it. So
that's amazing.
Granted,
that you
I
broke
was
the head.
I looked a little drunk and swaying when I walked away, and Bird had to help me from keeping walking on the track when I climbed out of the vehicle. But nonetheless, I'm a big believer in the safety stuff. I had a back injury in a suspension seat, and I've never raced in a suspension seat again. I've used a tub seat. Yes, they're expensive, but I'm just a big believer in, looking into things like that and protect. I mean, when you're out there racing, it's just an insane feeling. And so I want to protect my ability to do that in the future. So.
And what kind of tub seat are you using?
OMP is what I use.
So that's a carbon fiber type seat?
No, it's fiberglass.
Fiberglass. Okay.
Yeah, carbon fiber. Yeah, I don't know if there's a carbon fiber is just lighter and more money. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's cool. And then of course that has a padded cover that you actually sit within or between you and the fiberglass, correct?
Yep. Yes. Okay. So, and there is a difference. It's not like I know people say the suspension seats can protect your back, but that's wrong. So there's a number of, I don't know anybody that's switched from a suspension seat to a tub seat and gone back to a suspension seat in a race vehicle. Right. Are suspension seats great on the trail? Oh yeah, absolutely. Are they more comfortable? Absolutely. Are they going to compress your back? Yep. In a big hit? Yep.
Yeah, I know that there's a couple of schools of thought, and I'm not a safety expert by any means. I know that when I had drivers come to me that got hurt at rock crawling events and in suspension seats or in solid seats and said, you need to outlaw the solid seats, especially like the aluminum ones. And I'm like, I can't do that. And they were like, why? And I said, well, because if I require somebody to use one thing and they get hurt in that one thing and they wanted to use something else, I can become liable at that point.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
I always said that, they needed to be a high, it's always the seat has to be a high standard of some type,
So just as important as what the seat you use is how it's mounted and understanding the application. While a tub seat feels rigid, they have built-in give to them. They have a life to them. Just like seatbelts. If you take a big hit with the seatbelt, they're made to stretch. They're going. Not all seatbelts, but good seatbelts. You take a big impact, you're done. Same thing with the helmet. I have crashed enough on dirt bikes and vehicles to actually be able to witness and feel like the foam that has been crushed inside the head.
Well, if you spidered a helmet, you probably did some damage to the interior of that helmet as well. Yeah, that's
Correct.
yeah. So
Yep.
then, rock crawling. When you came out to started rock crawling, your first event was the Las Cruces event, which was Bob Hazel, I believe.
Yes. So the first rock crawling event, at a big competitive level, was yes, the Bob Hazel's event in Las Cruces.
Okay, and I think
And I
that was a
believe
BFG event. I think
yes, that was a BFG event. You're correct.
Okay, and how did you guys do down there? Who was your spotter?
Joel Swanson was a longtime buddy. It was just an unbelievable experience. So yeah, Joel Swanson was my spotter. We went down there with just expectations to go have a fun. So we borrowed my in-laws truck, loaded 5 of us in it with a shell on the back, and then drove out there. The event was awesome. We wheeled. I can't remember all the trails down there, but it was in Las Cruces. It was a 2-day event. There was 2 days, and then a what they called the Dirty Dozen on the last day,
Right.
for the finals. So basically, I think they maybe started with 50, 60 and whittled it down to either 12 or 13 people. And we went into it. We actually went into the last day or in the Dirty Dozen, I think in second or third place. And I had never driven a lot of those ledges before. Northern California, we don't really have those ledges. It's all, low gear, rock crawling. A lot of the stuff back there, it wasn't, launching up stuff, but they were a little bit different terrain than what we were used to. So, but it was a great event. I actually ended up breaking the second day, but we fixed it in the parking lot, and we were still in good enough position. I think we went into the finals second or third place. During the finals, I flipped it, and I think we got 6th overall. So
Not bad. It's very good.
no, it was great. It was just at that time, you're not in awe of everybody that's there, but it's all the guys that you saw in the magazines, and you're like,
Right.
cool. I'm door to door with these guys, like, this is cool. Hey, I got to talk to so-and-so, and not starstruck, but it was just cool. Like being around that group, realizing that you're competing against these people. It was just, it's a great experience. So.
And then after that, did you do the next one he did, which was
Johnson Valley.
Johnson Valley. Yep.
Oh yeah. No, I was hooked on it. I have not missed an off-road competition since that first 98 year. So I have not missed a competition since that year. I've competed at least once every year, in whatever you want to call the premier group. So whether it was Vora Off-Road Racing or your Cal Rocks events or U-Rock or King of the Hammers or all the others, XRRA. So I have not missed a competition. a year of competition since that first 98.
Wow,
So
that's pretty good.
so I've always been hooked from it. So I haven't always been able to go to, obviously I haven't done every event and every series and
Right.
competed at the level that would be awesome to be able to do. But yeah, so to carry on what you're asking is, so I competed in Las Cruces, and then every year after that with it, I think it turned to called Pro Rock, and I competed then for a while. But I've been involved with it ever since. So
Excellent. And I know you ran with Cal Rocks a lot, because I remember you being up at Donner a number of times with us.
mm-hmm. So yeah, I ended up competing with Jeff Mello, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and being on his team, which was another awesome experience. And you know, I learned a lot from Jeff as far as being a competitor, and actually the level that Jeff puts in it on competition day is pretty good. And it's, you know, I think I know for a fact if I would have had his mentality on some of the earlier things, I would have finished better, because he really focuses on things. He pays attention to detail. So I did learn from that. I think I had the mentality so often that I probably still carry over a little bit of being prepared, but also there's a limit on, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do what I can do. So it's kind of like running what you brung. Is I take that a little extreme sometimes. So
Have you done this all on your own dime, or have you had marketing partners that have helped you along the way, or
so
sponsors, as many drivers call it?
with the early rock crawling stuff, I was associated with, back to the Super Shop days when I worked at Super Shops. I got tied in with BFG and the Rough Riders. So way back in the 91, 92, I got tied in with the Rough Riders and BFG through Super Shops. So I ended up getting I think the first Moab edition tires, which were supposed to be a sticky tire before they had stickies. And I put those on the CJ, and then I ended up getting to go out and drive with the Rough Riders out in the desert when I lived in Nevada. So I got tied in with BFG then, and so I was able to get tires hooked up with BFG and getting tires for the tough truck events and stuff like that. And BFG, as you probably remember, had unbelievable contingencies, and then they carried that into the rock crawling days.
Yes.
And so when I was with Jeff Mello, and he was a BFG guy, like BFG, they put it out there, like they paid good for if you ran BFGs for winning. And so I carried that BFG stuff up to basically KOH. When KOH started, I ended up meeting Mike Green with Pitbull. And then I've been on Pitbull ever since. So
Mike Green, El Diablo.
Yes. So as far as the sponsorship, so without Pitbull, I would not have been able to race all the racing I've done in the last, since what was the first KOH, 07? 08?
Yep.
So I've been with Pitbull since then. He's been my biggest supporter. I've had been fortunate to be part of a few other companies out there like Reed Racing that have provided me support, and Jamar brakes, and I have a set of trophy truck brakes. So I met Don at SEMA 10 plus years ago, and so he supported me with equipment there. And so I haven't been a full sponsor, but I've got enough industry support to keep me in the game, is the best way to say it.
Okay.
At one time when we were racing KOH and racing Bora and doing the rock racing and everything we could, there was a time where there was an opportunity for more sponsorship at basically a full-time level, but I could not consciously make that jump because I had a full-time job that worked 50, 60 hours a week at the railroad. So it's, the railroad wouldn't let me take any more days off than I was already taking off to go to do these events. And is be careful what you wish for with sponsorships, because you may be given an opportunity to do it full time, but that's a decision you have to realize impacts you. It's not just racing you're impacting. It's not covering your racing. You have to make that switch to that. It's a career move, and give up what you're doing, your day job.
True.
And I was not willing to do that. What the racing did for me is it led to a lot of other avenues of income to support the racing. So when you're out there and you're making a name for yourself, people want what you have. Being that I fabricate everything myself, I've built a number of things for other racers out there. And so that was kind of, while I wasn't fully sponsored, racing led to other income is the best way to say it. So if you're in the industry, it's great, but my day job isn't in the industry, which it's good and bad, right? So if you're in the industry, it could lead to more sponsorship, but if you're outside the industry, it's difficult. And so my day job has always been outside of the off-road industry, with the exception of, the small things that I have been paid to do, fabricate and stuff like that. So
is there a certain product that you have that people purchase that you're fabricating, or is it just doing fab work for people?
I've done a lot of one-off stuff for people, machining adapters. I've fabricated a handful or a number of housings from scratch. So I love fabricating. I don't like repairing.
Okay.
The housings on my Ultra 4 car, the rear uses a Super 14, and I have the original. I had no less than 80 hours into building the original housing in that, and I'll do it. I'll do another one. I like doing that. What I don't like is building a new one after I've trashed it. So, and unfortunately, that was like, when I've taken the time to build something right, it's lasted. So, but yeah, so I've done a number of things. I've helped a few. There's a number of people out there of the top guys that I've helped give them some behind the scenes help too with building things for them. So
cool, excellent. So then let's talk about those early days and the rock crawling. And the racing, XRA, and that kind of stuff. Was it? What was the camaraderie like out there?
Oh, it was awesome. You go to see people. Like I said, the racing's there. And again, it's similar to rugby, where you can just send it in. A lot of that stuff wasn't door to door, but you're not sharing information with everybody ahead of the race, and you see a line, you're not going to give it up. That information, and it's like rock crawling. You see a line. The only time you'd ever see a line is if you'd hint somebody, hey, what do you think about that? And you just want to see if they'll do it, just to see, so because they're ahead of you. Or again, other tricks from Mello is there's this thing called pit racing, and you get in people's heads. And I enjoyed that part of the competition too. But the camaraderie is great. Not everybody's gonna get along. People are gonna complain, all that. But it's such a, like, the core of off-road is a big family, and that part is cool. It's flattering when people come up and that they remember you, and maybe, I used to compete against you in the Cow Rocks days, or I met you at in Colorado at one of those old events, stuff like that. So the camaraderie is awesome. I mean, I've made some lifelong friends out of it. So, do
you still wheel Ford Ice in the Rubicon?
I do. I got out of it. I didn't get out of it. I was just didn't make the opportunity to go like I should have. I put racing and life ahead of rec wheeling a little too much for a while. And now I look forward to those rec trips as much as I do the racing.
Excellent.
So, my older daughter's 21, and after one of the KOH events, she was absolutely insatiable about getting, or like she had to have a Jeep, wouldn't stop thinking about a Jeep till we got it. And we end up getting a salvage JK. And then we got a salvage JK, and Trevor from WFO sold us some takeoff Rubicon axles, and he's provided some tremendous support to us also over the years. And so we built my daughter a Jeep, and now it's one of the highlights of the years to go on my daughter's birthday trip to the Rubicon. So we've started making more annual trips again, just like we did when we were young. When there was a year, I think I went to the Rubicon. I probably went 25 times in one year up to the Rubicon. So those days aren't available. Those are not going to be repeated again while you have to work. But yeah, the rec wheeling is something that we're definitely making an effort to do more of. So.
And do you is it just like you and your daughter, or do you got, is Joel still into it and some of the other guys you used to hang with?
I still see a lot of those guys. I think Joel's doing the side-by-side thing. They bought property up in Nevada, so they go rip town to town with those with the side-by-sides. He's still around. A lot of the, like, Daniel Gutenberg and those guys, we're still wheeling. So still wheeling with a lot of the same people we did from high school.
Excellent. And you're just racing KOH now, well, you raced at Prairie City the other day, did you, or were you just hanging out?
Yeah, I was out hanging out. So I raced KOH. We raced John Goodby's NorCal races here periodically. I want to go do another desert race. I really love the desert racing, even though it's kind of in the rock crawler. It's still it's fun. The thing I like about desert racing is point to point. I love KOH. I love KOH, but I'm not a fan of laps. I like to go point to point. So laps make it easier for teams to pit and all that. But I think the idea of point to point is getting from A to B, and that's the mission. So, and a lot of the desert racing, like Vegas to Reno, we've done that before. It's the point to point that it feels like you're accomplishing getting from point A to point B.
Right.
So.
Yeah, when I owned Vora, my goal was to have the laps absolutely as long as possible. But I could never get, like a 250-mile lap. So
Correct.
I'd always have to do at least 2 or 3 laps to get that. But, you're still out in the Nevada desert. There wasn't a whole lot of pit opportunities.
No. And the land use and what it takes and the permitting and the coordination is tremendous to do a point to point.
Right.
And I get that. So, while I like point to point, the lap races have so many advantages too, especially for the guys that you've begged to go out there and help you, because it makes it a lot easier for them. And so, yeah, I'll live with either. I think a lot of racers feel the same way I do. You put on a helmet, whether you're in the Ultra 4 car doing KOH, or you do a race at Prairie City, or you put a helmet on a go-kart track. A lot of times it feels the same. Like you're competing against somebody, and whatever you're driving as hard as you can, the most you can get out of it. So it's just that it's a feeling that's hard to describe.
I always try to remind the drivers that, not being on the competitive side myself. I'm very competitive. That's why I've not competed in events.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife can attest to why I shouldn't. But we, being a promoter, you talk to all the drivers and everything. And one of the things that we noticed, especially, not so much with the rock crawling, but with the racing, is that it seemed like as soon as you drop the visor down, that it's like a fog comes over your brain, and it becomes more mechanical. The body's just doing what the body's doing, and the brains may not be all involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always tell everybody, you lose 50% of your IQ as soon as you close that visor,
Yep.
because you become like, everybody thinks they become Superman. And, saw it out in the desert with Vora a lot, where guys would just be, I know they pre-ran. They came through an area that, maybe the top speed was just 45 miles an hour, and they
Mm-hmm.
would try to come through at 65 or 70,
Right.
and then all of a sudden it'd be a big cloud of dust and I'd be untangling cars.
Nope. I understand exactly what you're saying. Some of the mentality, like, so the emotions you go through before a race, and especially when you're door to door with somebody, the races, John's races, and like the Stampedes and stuff, the stuff at Prairie City where you're door to door. There's so many times when you're lining up and you're getting ready and you're like, oh, this is ridiculous. I can't afford this. These cars are fast and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what am I doing? What am I doing? All the way up until that flag drops. And then everything goes out the window and it's just pure fun. Like, you don't think about any of that when you're going. All you're thinking about is, can I outbrake him to the corner? Can I get around him? Who's coming up on me at 100 miles an hour because I can't do the same speed through here that some of the other guys can do? But like, you're nervous, butterflies, whatever. It's just that feeling that you can't describe. But then the minute that flag goes, it's gone, and it's just, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is awesome. So
I get a chance, being that I'm not in a car, that I get a chance to see everyone's significant others. So I'm watching girlfriends and wives or mothers. It's not so much the dads, but the mothers, and watching the emotions that they're going through on the sideline while the racers are out there, rubbing paint, bouncing off each other's tires, getting locked up, whatever, is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I'm surprised anybody is still married after a race, having their significant other watch them.
right.
It's just, it used to be like in Prairie City when we raced Vora there, you'd come up the big stadium jump in front of the grandstands there and the scoring tower, and then you either had to make that sharp U-turn, a hairpin there, or you would go off into the hot pit area and then have to come back out. But
right.
Do you remember all the wrecks that used to happen right there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
absolutely.
Every weekend, one of the classes, especially, it'd always be one of the buggy classes, the 4-wheel drives. I remember you guys, it looked like a demolition derby. I mean, somebody would slow down and guys would just drive over each other.
Right. Yeah. The one thing about race cars and Ultra 4s and 4-wheel drives in general is it doesn't take any talent to go fast with 4-wheel drive. It takes talent to deal with what you come up to at speed. But it like, and I know you remember the Voras when we had the land rush starts.
Oh yeah.
So having cars 10, 12, 15 wide at a start. I can't imagine if you did that now with Ultra 4. Everybody would be wrecked except for the car that cleared. So, but that intensity, again, like, it's hard to describe. And, when I talk about, like, when you're lined up in your stage and you get nervous, when you do the land rush starts, you can't see anybody else. All you're looking out there. So you don't think about those things. All you're doing is, okay, just wait for him to try to time it and go. So, but yeah, I get what you're saying about the wives and everything. So my family, unfortunately, has had to watch a few ugly crashes with me. And I can't thank them enough for giving me the support. So, and it's hard. It's even, I couldn't watch it, I'll put it that way. So
if your daughter came to you and said, Dad, I want to get into the Ultra 4 car and race at Prairie City, Are you saying yes or no?
If she wants to do it, I mean, she does horses and rodeo type things. So
Okay.
pick your poison.
Yeah.
So,
At least in a
you know,
car, you're belted in and a helmet and all the safety gear. On a horse, you might
yeah,
have a helmet and some leathers on, but
we've had injuries on the horses too. So pick your poison. I think that the key is to know your limits. So even though now and then you get nutty in the car, I still think I try to keep it. Like I've never been the driver that closes their eyes and just sends it. Um, I will send it with my eyes open. I will take chances, but I'm not someone that's going to purely rely on fate or luck.
okay.
I don't believe in luck because I don't like the idea that something else that I don't like the idea of I don't have control over my outcome. So, but while there's fortune and misfortune, I don't like to think of it as luck. So I've never been someone that just closes their eyes and just, I'm going to put it to the floor. I'm going to turn my wheel. I'm going to go for that one little 6-inch gap ledge. And that's where I'm aiming for my tire. I know a lot of people say I just close my eyes and send it across the rocks, but I actually do, like, whether I'm falsely believing I have control over it, there is a tactic that I am going across the rocks with. It doesn't look like it, and maybe I'm living my own lie, but I'm still going to believe that I'm driving. I have somewhat control. So,
So like Chris Durham, there's always that clip of him up at Donner Ski Ranch trying to get up that, I don't know, it's like a 10-foot wall or something like that with a crack line in it, and he's just bouncing off the rev limiter, and the car is just I mean, it's not flipping, but it's just bouncing all over the place, and then all of a sudden, boom, he pops up on top. I think that was probably one of the original rock bouncer moments.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when he went up the first the first rock crawl that we did down in Lucerne Valley at the race at the shooting range, it was the Lions Pride Park. He had a run up that canyon that Walker goes, all right, I've got to beat Chris's time up that. And I'm like, why do you have to beat his time? And he goes, because he went so fast, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Everybody became a racer that day instead of a rock crawler.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy.
Chris was amazing to watch. So he's another guy that I'm not gonna believe for a second he just closed his eyes either. Like, he had reasons for what he was doing. He had such good throttle control. He was a talented driver. So I got to wheel with him a couple times in Johnson Valley, outside of a competition. Well, actually, we were there for a competition, but a handful of guys that really loved to wheel would go out and wheel at night outside of the competition in the competition vehicles.
Right.
So just to get the trail wheeling in. And he drove like that on the trail. Like, he'd give it a try or two and then he'd square up and go. So,
and light the fuse. Yep.
A lot of it was that his vehicle, that's how his vehicle worked. So he's not, it was a wide, long and stable, low and stable. So he's not going to be able to crawl over things because he's going to hang up, and he had to launch it over things, but he had skill. So
yeah, I don't know, he'd be sawing that wheel back and forth, and it was like, okay, I just saw that, it was almost like I just started to feel that traction. So he'd go back at it and just a little bit different throttle, and then boom, he'd be up. And you'd be wondering, like, looking at it going, does he even realize what he's doing? But he did. It was successful with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then racing KOH. The goal of that race, of course, is not only just to finish, but to survive the desert, because most rock crawling cars at least in the very early days, they didn't die on the rock trails. They died out in the desert. Is that correct?
I think, yeah, I think that's probably true. So,
So what did you do to overcome those kind of heating issues? Because that all came down to heat, whether it was in the tranny, the axles, or the engine itself.
I don't think I never really experienced those issues. The I've always tried to overbuild my vehicles. So, when the first vehicle I raced at KOH was a few months removed from actually one of the Cal Rocks events. Um, and I didn't personally have those issues. The issue I had the first KOH was on the rocks, hitting a rock hard enough to blow the hydraulic line was my first DNF at KOH. That was my demise. Is just what worked for rock crawling going slow doesn't work for going fast against things.
Right.
And I don't think that anybody has, I mean, to build a vehicle to survive all that, it's going to be, you're going to build something that's so massive and so heavy, it may not be a winning vehicle. So I think that what everybody is discovering is that there is, at least the top teams know there's substantial maintenance between races. Because if you overbuilt your car so much, it's not built to win. There is some of that you have to have a car that will survive. But I think the competition is so fierce now that you cannot overbuild your car. I think that's why that so many people are going to exotic materials to get every advantage, because if one team does it, everybody has to. Everybody's looking for that extra 5% to be ahead of the game. Who's willing to do that? So back in the early days, I do think that there were a lot of cars that were underbuilt. I didn't necessarily experience those types of failures as far as fabrication, things that broke. So I was fortunate there. And I've always been big on cooling, like oversized coolers. I've always had oversized coolers. So
it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. When I built the car that I first competed in KOH with, I wanted an athletic buggy. So it was before kind of KOH existed, but I knew I wanted something more athletic than just a rock crawler. So I kind of built it knowing that's where I wanted to go with it. And plus that's when the XRA rock races were coming in, and I'd hoped to go do those. So when I put the last buggy together, I wanted to do everything car, and it turned out to be pretty good. So
excellent. So what's in the future for Kevin Yoder?
I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I'm not going to run 10 races a year. My thoughts are that KOH is not even a question. It's just, I'm going. So I'm racing KOH as long as they let me. I have in the past, I have started doubting if it's the right thing to do. And unfortunately some very big people in the industry stepped up and said, you got to run this. What are you doing? And they helped me out to get me back to KOH. So, those people I'm ever grateful for, and the support of, Jeff Mello and Trevor from WFO and Dave Cole they've always been super strong supporters in what I do. And of course my family. So my plan for the rest of the year is to get out and go race, maybe a VOR race or one of John's NorCals. And then, I want to give, a bigger effort to KOH. Again, I'm guilty of just not being satisfied with getting to the race, but getting to the race is always just the first hurdle I have to go through. I think there's more people like me that are just challenged to get to the race than there are the top teams that, are really all in working out the minute details on what their best chances to win. I think there's more people like me than more people like, that are just doing every little thing they can to win. They're challenged getting there just like me. So my plan is to start prepping for KOH now, to get the car out there, to get it down there ahead of KOH, to go. I had new shocks a few years ago. Wayne from Alltech helped me tune them, and then they came back and the car sat, and I ended up getting air on the oil side, and that's what kind of caused me an issue this year. So my front shocks were basically vacuum locked down. So my plan is to be as prepared as I can, like I've never been before for KOH. So
excellent.
That's my plan.
That's a good plan.
My buggy is a buggy. It's still more of a buggy than a race car. It's just a rock buggy. I try to drive fast. It has stayed more like a buggy than a race car, for the reason that it still goes out on the trails now and then. When my daughter was learning to do the off-road, we put her and her boyfriend in it, and went to the Rubicon on it, because I figured that's the safest place you could be. If you're in that car, you can drive anywhere you want and you can't get hurt.
Right.
So we do take the buggy on the trail now and then. So I'm not saying the car's not going to go out before KOH, but I want to get a race or two in, but my main focus is just kind of putting myself in position to do better at KOH next year.
Awesome.
So.
Now I have, Brian Butcher, who used to race Vora when he was a kid. Him and his wife Laura are doing a really good job with Vora.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good opportunity to get out there and do longer laps than say Prairie City. So I think that's a good test for a vehicle. Of course, it's not what it's going to do in the rocks. So
yeah, Vora means a lot to me. I mean, I had such a great time, such a great experience. Going way back and racing through it, and when you had it, and I do know BJ, and I've been wanting to get out there to go race one of them. So I hope and I haven't missed them all. But I had it on my mind that both a couple of us want to take our rock buggies out and go race them again. So
awesome.
Bit of Vora.
Well, that's good to hear. So I think we've touched on everything. Is there anything that you can think of that we haven't touched on?
No, I think I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So
okay. Well, awesome. Well, Kevin, I want to say thank you for jumping on board and making the time to, in your busy life, to, sit down and talk for the hour and a half, 2 hours that we've been talking, and sharing your history with us, and for sharing your history with me coming out to our events. I've really appreciated that, and as I wind down my rock crawling career as a promoter, it's I get to look back on all those people that I got to meet, and that I figure I can still call friends, and you're one of those, so I appreciate it.
Appreciate that, Rich. Thank you.
All right. Well, you take care today, and have fun with the family.
All right. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Conversations with Big Rich. Please let your friends know about this podcast. Let us know what you think of Conversations with Big Rich. Please forward ideas to me, contacts of those that I should attempt to interview. Leave a rating on any of the services you found us on. We look forward to your comments and ideas. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and grab all the gusto you can.